E-telligence. Energizing your email marketing with Kate Barrett.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the E-telligence Creative Review. I'm Kate Barrett, the founder of eFocus Marketing, a specialist email marketing agency helping companies to use email more intelligently.
I'm Elliot Russ, I'm CEO at Taxi for Email, which is a platform that helps email marketing teams make better email.
So today for our creative review, we're going to be looking at a product-based email from Net-a-Porter. So Net-a-Porter are an online fashion brand, and the reason we picked this example to talk about today was because of how it's designed, and I think it's a really good example of bringing quite a lot of content into your emails, but having quite good sectioning to it. So let's start right at the beginning, and before we jump into that design, I just want to have a little look at the technical sending of the email. And one of the things that I noticed when I was pulling out this example for us to discuss was the sending address. So you've got a main address that's being used for the reply to, which is absolutely fine, but fantastically they are using a subdomain to send from. Now this is really important because if you are using your main domain as your sending from address, your sending from email address, what you are doing is hitting on the possibility that that holistic domain reputation is going to be picked up from other areas, and that you with your email marketing could have a negative or positive, obviously, impact on that domain, but mostly we would kind of see a negative coming through there. So you always want to make sure that you're sending from a subdomain, or a completely different domain from your main company domain. So in this case they are using email.net-a-porter.com. So that's great. The friendly from name clearly references that it's Net-a-Porter sending those emails. So right there in the inbox, we've already got that trust element coming through, which is really important. The subject line is pretty on point. It's telling you, what it is that you're going to see in this email. So the dress and boots pairing that we love. So it's telling you that they're going to give you some inspiration. They're going to give you a pairing that they would put together. Now, something in fashion that I think a lot of people struggle with is what needs to go together. So they're actually hitting on probably a key question that their target audience has. So it's definitely important to think about that. They've got TLS encryptions, they've got that security, particularly with Gmail, that's really important. They've got the unsubscribe header that's connected there, so that one-click unsubscribe to go through and allow them to do that straight from that heading section of the email. Now, if we go into the design, what I love about this is how the email's broken down. So starting right up at the top, you've got obviously the branding with their logo, and then coming into that navigation menu. Now, some people love a navigation menu, some people don't. I do like it because I think that if they haven't seen anything else in the email that they particularly like, it gives them the opportunity to then go and browse other sections of your website. I mean, Elliot, what's your thoughts on having a navigation menu at the top of an email creative?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously depends what the brand is and where you're at in terms of your company and all that kind of stuff. Broadly, there's two sort of camps. I guess, like you said, it's really useful if the content of your email is, if that doesn't grab people for whatever reason, they can still click through and find stuff. So that's why it tends to be pretty prevalent in e-commerce emails particularly. The flip side, I suppose, is if the content in your email isn't interesting and relevant for people, then maybe that's a job for segmentation and personalization and that kind of stuff, rather than relying on navigation, I suppose. And also potentially there's a little bit of a risk if you have a navigation at the top that people will click onto that and not read the rest of the email. But in e-commerce particularly, a lot of the time the aim is to really just get people onto the website to start buying things, basically, right? So I think it works particularly well in this case. But if it's a more editorial focused email, or an email where it's really important that people actually read the content rather than click through to the website. You might want to consider either putting the navigation at the bottom or even thinking about taking it out completely.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. What I love is that as we come off of that top section, we then start to go into some really clearly defined areas of the email. So right up at the top, we've got that attention grabbing headline with the chic list, and you've actually got a call to action right there at the top of the email, so you can go through and start shopping straight away. Then you start coming into sections, and this email follows two kind of classic design principles that you will see in a lot of emails that come into your inbox. So the first is using that rule of three, so using a heading or a subheading, your main content for that section, so a little description paragraph, and then a call to action. And you can see that repeated almost in every single section of this email. So it leads people down in that inverted triangle through to each call to action. It's dragging you down the email, and in each section it's dragging you to take that action. So I really like that. And it's also we've got that column design, so we break it up with the 4 columns at the top and at the bottom, but in between that you've got a little bit of a start of an S shape, bringing people down. Again, it does quite a good job of, even though it's a long email, breaking it up so that at each point you know what they're asking from you, and you can very clearly see what it is that they're offering and then what you need to do in that action.
Yeah, exactly. They've done a really good job here making an email that is something where you might sort of scroll through within sort of 3 or 4 seconds and get the gist of what's going on, but also you can sit down and read through it a bit more as if you're reading a magazine. Like, they've kind of taken a sort of editorial approach to the design. It's not overtly selling. There's a bit of kind of, here's a product shot and that's that, but on the most part it's got a more kind of upmarket editorial feel, a bit like you're reading a sort of glossy magazine or something like that. And the kind of zigzag layout really helps with that, because otherwise, if it is just the same sort of modular shape over and over, it can get a bit repetitive, and perhaps people won't read through as much of the email as they will do otherwise.
Definitely, and I think this is actually a really good example of a modular template. You can almost just absolutely identify exactly what those modular elements are that they're using. So you've got the image on the left or the image on the right. You've got the 4-column element with the call to action in the middle. They've got a really simplistic but very, very clever modular template that they're obviously using here.
Yeah, exactly. I've worked with a bunch of companies sort of in this sort of space, and they get a lot of email out the door, and they tend to go down this route of having the sort of modular approach pretty quickly, because it's a massive efficiency for them. And otherwise, if they're going to sort of design and build each email from scratch, they wouldn't be able to hit the kind of volume that they want to do of actually sending email.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's the way forward when you're building email at volume, and you want to make sure that you've got your branding straight, that you've got that connection between every email that you send, and you want to make sure that those emails are easy to read. It's absolutely critical to have that modular template. And I love what you said about that editorial glossy magazine feel. The images are backing up the content, which is fantastic, but I think that it definitely matches their brand personality. It matches what you're going to see on the website, which is really important in terms of that customer experience.
Yeah, exactly. Like it kind of matches what's going on in social as well, especially if you look at their social accounts. They'll have this kind of sort of high-end-ish sort of aesthetic. Like, they're not kind of high street brand, they're a bit sort of level above that.
Yeah, definitely. And they definitely reflect that in their content. So, all good things to say about this email. I really, really love it. I think maybe in terms of what could be tested, having individual actual call to action buttons or text links underneath where they've got the 4 products. I know they've got a shop now, and each of those individual images does go through to the individual products, but maybe having individual buttons underneath each of those products, or where they've got the shop now links underneath each of the key sections that are in as text, maybe putting those as a different color, maybe trying those as buttons. That's definitely something I would look at in terms of testing. And then of course the length of the email, whether or not there's too many things in this email, could be something in question.
Yeah, I mean it is quite a long email, but it's fairly straightforward to sort of digest.
Agreed.
So yeah, it kind of depends. Yeah, I think I'm sure these types of companies, they do a lot of testing and sort of split tests and things, because they send a lot of email, but also they have a fairly large audience where they can get a sort of pretty significant statistical relevance to their tests. So I'm sure they've got to a point where they've at least found what's working for them. Yeah, I mean you could test short versus long and things like that, but at the end of the day, if it's working, it's working.
Absolutely, and I think that is an absolutely key point to make. You've got to go with what your data is telling you. We can suggest different things, but in all honesty, the reason that I've picked this one is because I really love it. I think it's a really fantastic example of how you can get a lot of content. And like you say, I think Net-a-Porter definitely would have gone with the numbers and what their audience is telling them. If Net-a-Porter are listening, we'd be really interested to learn more about what your process is of building these emails and how you go about testing them, because I'm sure you do. And I think this is the type of email that shows that it's not just been slapped together, it's been thought about and that it has been tested. And I absolutely love that. One of the things that I perhaps would look at adjusting, and again, it depends on your audience, it depends on the breakdown of your audience and how many people are registered with Microsoft, Yahoo or other oath providers, or Gmail. But what I saw in Gmail when I received this email was that after that section of the runway ready, it's actually being clipped by Gmail. So if we have a look, it's only clipping that very bottom section, but what you lose in the clipping is your unsubscribe link. Very, very importantly, that's being clipped out. But you lose your social media, you lose that end part of the message. So it's something to think about if you do have a reasonable sized Gmail audience. And we know that Gmail for B2C particularly is one of the main email providers. So definitely think about this. Gmail clipping, I think, happens at 102 kilobytes. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's 102 kilobytes of code. So that's not including the size of the images that you're linking to. In this example as well, it's kind of cut off halfway through that kind of module as well. Like it's showing 2 products instead of 4. So it might be like the link on the second image is broken, that kind of thing. So there's a few things you can do to work into that. Quite often when we build email, there's quite a lot of duplicated code because you have to make stuff work in different email clients and things like that. It might be, especially these kind of e-commerce companies, if you look at who's actually opening the email and what email clients they're using, typically the bulk of the audience is in 3 or 4 different email clients. So it might be the case where if you've got a bunch of code to make something work in Yahoo Mail, and that's only 2% of your audience, it might be worth taking the hit and saying, actually, it's going to look slightly different in Yahoo, and we're going to save a whole bunch of code to make it work better in Gmail, for example. Not particularly picking on Yahoo there, but you know what I mean? Like there might be a kind of pick your battles kind of moment to have there. The other thing to bear in mind as well is that if the limit is 102k, that's where it does cut off, but by the time your code goes through an ESP, it's going to add about 10-15k to your code as well, because all the links get encoded, a whole bunch of tracking stuff gets added, images get uploaded to image servers, that kind of stuff. So you might, when you're building HTML, you might want to sort of work towards 80k as a sort of upper limit, and then leave yourself a bit of headroom for it to sort of get a bit more bloated in the ESP.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So just to reiterate what you said earlier, when it comes to Gmail clipping, it's the weight of the email, not the images. Now don't forget that the images are going to be put in links. So if you've got a really long image link that's in there, that's going to have an impact. But the actual weight of the email, of the image itself, isn't what's impacting the size of the email here. It's the coding that you're using. So how that's broken down. Yeah, so your links, your HTML code, all of those elements that are actually written into the email.
Yeah, so one typical response to this which isn't a particularly good response, is to do more stuff as images. Because then, so for example, if you've got a whole bunch of table code that's splitting out different columns and rows to make those 4 images, for example, you could, the 4 product shots with the text underneath, you could do all of that as one big image and save yourself maybe 5 or 10 Ks worth of code. The trouble is then your text will be stuck in an image, it won't be accessible, it'll be hard to update, so the price changes, you've got to go back to Photoshop to update it. All these kind of things cause you more problems than they solve, but you might be tempted to go down that route to sort of save yourself some code. So really it's one of those things you have to consider from the outset, because if you make an email that's really long, you need to think about how weighty your code might be to achieve that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Try not to go down that route, because again, especially with products, if you're grouping those together and then only having one link behind it, you break the customer experience of being able to click through to the individual products. If you've got an email that is very image heavy, we've of course got images being disabled on desktop devices still, but even with mobile devices where images are turned on a lot of the time, you've got to think about loading times for those images to actually show. So definitely consider the number of images that you're using and make sure that the images back up your content and don't form your content. And I think that's a really good kind of segue into the final point about this email. And again, Net-a-Porter have done a really good job here of making the email mobile responsive. So you can see on the screen how all of the content stacks one after the other, and where you've got those blocks of 4 products in a row on the desktop version or the webmail version, it then stacks into a 2-column design. So I really like how they've worked that out in terms of the mobile element, and that menu at the top also goes into a hamburger menu.
Yeah, they've done a really nice job here. The other thing to bear in mind with that kind of zigzag layout is if you were going to stack, typically the way that you stack stuff is you take the second column and put it underneath the first. So if you have a zigzag layout, you end up with image text, and then if you're not careful, the next module turns into text image, so it doesn't really make much sense when it's all viewed as one big column. So what they will have done is on the second module where the image was on the right instead of the left, there's this sort of different coding approach you have to take to make sure that the image goes above the text and not below it, so that it all kind of stacks as image text all the way down on mobile. So that's something to consider, because the code for it is slightly different, and it's sometimes there's challenges making it work in different places. So it's worth kind of speaking to your developers if you want to go down that route.
Yeah, really great point. And definitely it just reinforces the need to always test your emails before they go out. Modular templates will definitely help with that, but you should still be testing to make sure that when you do put those modules in, they all sit nicely together in that individual email that you're building before it all goes out. So yeah, I think that's a really great point. So Elliot, is there anything else that you want to say about this email? Good, bad, or ugly?
No, I like it. I think that's. Evidently it works for them, because they send these types of emails out quite a lot. I guess there's always things that you could think of that they could work at, either improve or test or see if it would build on it. But quite often, if you find a formula that works, sometimes the better approach is to stick to it, rather than to change things for the sake of it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Stick with the numbers, stick with what works for your audience, and go from there. So that's it for this month's E-telligence Creative Review. I hope you found it useful. If you want to submit an email for us to review, drop me an email to kate@e-focusmarketing.com. Now, I also just really quickly want to tell you about a really exciting development that we have. We're launching a new website called emaildesignguru.com, where we're going to be providing you lots more email marketing inspiration like this, from content and creative examples to sign up forms, unsubscribe processes, automated campaigns, preference centers, and much more. So if you've seen an example that you really like, or you want to submit something that your business is doing that you're really proud of, you can go onto the website and click the submit an example button and get in touch with us, or email me directly to kate@e-focusmarketing.com. So that website is launching very, very soon. Maybe you're watching this episode and it's already launched. Go over, take a look, sign up to find out more, and start browsing those examples and sending them in for us to build that bank of knowledge for email marketers everywhere. And don't forget, you can always listen on the go to the full E-telligence podcast. Just head over to e-focusmarketing.com/e-telligence, where you'll find the links to all of our episodes. Or you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, or whichever is your preferred podcast provider. So thanks for watching today, and Elliot and I will see you next month for another Email Marketing Creative Review.